Hey everyone, welcome back to Mastering English with Podcasts. I'm Raizel, and I'm here with my amazing co-host, Ricky. Hey, Ricky.
Hey, Raizel. Hey, listeners. Super excited to dive into today's topic. It's something every English learner has on their mind. Fluency. So, buckle up, folks. It's going to be a fun one.
Exactly. And to kick things off, let's start with a big question, Ricky. What does it mean to be fluent in English? How do we even know we're fluent?
Ooh, good question. I think being fluent means you can speak comfortably without constantly searching for words or second-guessing yourself. Like when you're talking to a friend and don't have to pause every few words. And let's throw in a quick example. If you can easily say, I went to the store, picked up some milk, and ran into my friend. Without stumbling, that's pretty fluent.
Exactly. It's almost like the words just flow. But here's another question. What's the difference between just speaking English and speaking it fluently?
Oh, totally. I'd say normal speaking can be a bit broken, with pauses or fillers, and maybe you're translating in your head. But fluent English, it's more natural, kind of like a rhythm. Like, you don't have to think about every word. Have you ever caught yourself speaking in English without realizing it?
Oh, all the time, especially when I'm excited. I just don't think about it. And that's really the goal here, right? To feel comfortable enough to let the words flow. Now, Ricky, why is fluency important in the first place?
Good one. I mean, fluency gives you confidence, right? It's so empowering to express yourself clearly. Imagine job interviews, presentations, or just connecting with people globally. Fluency helps you engage in meaningful conversations without that nagging worry of, did I say that right?
Couldn't agree more. And you don't feel left out in a group either. Now let's talk about the big one. How do we actually achieve fluency?
The million-dollar question. Well, it's all about consistency. Practice every day, even if it's just 10 minutes. And surround yourself with English, podcasts, music, and conversations with friends who speak it. What's your go-to, Raizel?
Honestly, for me, it's all about speaking out loud. Sometimes I narrate my day-to-day activities, like, I'm making coffee now, or time to read a book. It sounds silly, but it works.
That's a great tip. And it brings us to some specific tips for fluency. One of mine is thinking in English instead of translating in your head. That little switch changes everything.
Totally. And here's another. Use mirror practice. Stand in front of a mirror and just talk to yourself. Pretend you're giving a mini TED Talk, even if it's just about your breakfast.
Oh, I love that. Another favorite tip of mine is shadowing. Listen to a native speaker and try to mimic their words, tone, and speed. I do this with TV shows sometimes. The characters become my fluency coaches.
That's genius! And on that note, fluency can do wonders for your career. Have you seen people progress just because they're confident English speakers?
Absolutely. In many jobs, being fluent means you can network better, give killer presentations, and lead teams confidently. People notice that.
Couldn't agree more. And let's talk myths for a second. People think that fluency is some magical skill, like either you have it or you don't. But that's not true, right?
Not at all. Fluency is totally achievable. A big myth is that only people who start young can get fluent. But I've seen people in their 40s or 50s reach impressive fluency just by consistent practice.
Exactly. And what about practicing techniques? For example, how about Fluency Builder exercises? I know shadowing is a great one. What else?
Role-playing is huge. Let's say you're preparing for a trip. Practice ordering food, checking into a hotel, or asking for directions. Practicing scenarios you'll actually face helps a lot.
Yes. And how much time would you say people need to practice every day?
I'd say anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes. Don't overdo it because you'll burn out. It's like a workout. Consistency beats intensity every time.
That's solid advice. Speaking of burnout, do you think practicing aggressively is helpful? Like going all in?
I used to think so, but now I don't. Going too hard can actually make you dread practice. Small steps every day are better than cramming once a week.
True. Let's touch on obstacles. What are some challenges people might face in their journey to fluency?
Confidence for one. Fear of making mistakes can hold people back. And then there's the dreaded plateau, where you feel like you're not improving anymore.
Oh, that plateau. It's the worst. But the best way to overcome it? Change up your routine. Introduce new challenges, like harder reading materials or talking with a native speaker.
Yep, that helps a lot. And there's also the trap of practicing without feedback. Speaking alone is great, but without corrections, bad habits can sneak in.
Exactly. And speaking of bad habits, what common mistakes do people make when practicing for fluency?
Focusing too much on grammar, for one. Instead of trying to get every sentence perfect, let the ideas flow and correct yourself later.
Yes. And relying on fillers can be another issue, like overusing and But it's also part of learning. We all do it.
Definitely. So, how do you think people can avoid these mistakes?
One trick is to record yourself and listen back. It's uncomfortable at first, but you can catch filler words and awkward phrasing. Plus, it's a great way to measure your progress.
So true. And speaking of measuring progress, what are some ways listeners can track their improvement?
Great question. Keep a journal of phrases or sentences you struggled with, then revisit them after a month. You'll see the difference.
Another idea is to record yourself reading a paragraph today, and then read the same paragraph a month later. You'll be able to hear how much smoother you sound.
Love it. And now, let's give our listeners some tips and hacks to boost fluency. One that works for me is to think in English before bed, like mentally recapping my day in English.
That's a great one. I also recommend using English in text messages or social media posts. It makes practice feel natural.
Absolutely. And before we wrap up, here's a reflective tip. When you're learning, ask yourself, what's one new thing I learned today? It's such a simple way to stay engaged.
Perfect way to end it. Stay curious and don't be afraid to make mistakes. They're just part of the journey.
Couldn't agree more, Ricky. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Keep practicing, stay consistent, and most of all, have fun with it. Remember, it's all about enjoying the journey.
Yes, yes. And as always, if you found this helpful, give us a like, share it with friends, and comment on your own fluency tips or questions.
All right, take care, and happy practicing.